Hello YouTube, this is Mahadeva, the OG Thunder Wizard. So, you know that I value my freedom more than anything else. And I'm happy to say that I am experiencing freedom and have been for some time. But it is also a fact that every single one of us is a slave. Some of us are complete and total slaves, completely enslaved by our programming. In fact, in my experience, many people, the harder you struggle against your programming, the more ingrained it becomes. Your mind has been enslaved and it acts like a boa constrictor. It wraps around you. You know how boa constrictors and constrictor snakes, pythons, you know how they kill their prey? They squeeze, and they just stay at one strength of squeezing. So they just squeeze it, and they're patient. They wait for you to move, and every time you move, because of course you're going to struggle, then that opens them up to squeeze a little harder. And then in order to breathe, you have to exhale. So when you exhale, then they squeeze. And then what ends up happening is you suffocate. Because you're being squeezed so tightly and they won't let go, you can't get a breath and you die. And this is what your programming wants to do to you. And you have been programmed and you have been enslaved. And there's only one way out. And the only way out is to become conscious. To become fully conscious, not of what you may think. A lot of people throw around that word consciousness. You have to become conscious. And I'm seeking to achieve consciousness. It's not consciousness of what exists in the afterlife or being able to open your third eye and see the different beings that exist. That has nothing to do with it. You have to become conscious of all of the ways that you have been programmed. And even that isn't enough. Because becoming conscious of your programming, it doesn't give you the power to break free. Because you have been, evolution has built within you the very thing that enslaves you. So the very thing that enslaves you is your unconscious mind, which is the part of you that becomes programmed. It is the software. Your software is your programming, right? To get anything to work on your computer, whether it's a video game or whether it's this software I use to stream my videos, it's telling the computer what to do. That's what the software does. It tells you how to function, tells you what to do. And so your unconscious mind is this blank disk. We don't even use disk anymore. It's a blank thumb drive, whatever. It's a hard drive. Let's put it that way. It's your hard drive. And it's blank when you're born. And so as you become manifested in physical form, and then as you grow up, that blank hard drive is then programmed. And then by the time, you're, in many ways, by the time you're already 2 months old, you're already programmed. It's already over. But it's a slow process and you get programmed throughout your childhood. By the time you're 18, supposedly an adult, by the time you're 18, you've been completely programmed. I remember this when I was a kid and I was in, I believe it was must have been first grade. I think that's right. First grade in elementary school. And there was this other little kid there, of course, and he used to go out, and the toys that we had to play with back then was a long time ago. Late 60s. There was a little kid and he would go out and he had this little, it didn't really matter what his toy was, but this little kid looked like an angry old man. He was just always angry, and he always had this look on his face. And he was a challenging little kid to be around. And there was one point where I was looking at him, and I saw that he was already creating his persona, and that he was already an old man. He was just already this angry old man. And I just saw, wow, that's how he's going to be. The way he's expressing himself and the way he's interacting with life, that's it. He's going to be that way if he keeps doing that. And that has turned out to be true here 50, how old was I? 50 years later. That's absolutely true. I've seen that. I've been around on this planet long enough to see people I've known since I was a kid, and they have become the very thing that they were programmed to be. Very few people ever break out of that programming. And in fact, what I have seen is that on average, when people get to be between 25 and 35, that's when they decide to become a responsible adult. And so what happens is they become their parents. Even if when they were 17 years old or 20 years old or 25, they were rebelling and they were freedom-loving, hippie, whatever. By the time they get to be 30, 35, a lot of them have just become their parents. They went from being really liberal-minded to, if their parents were, Republicans, just hardcore, born-again Christian, right-wing Republican. That's just as an example. So whatever, it could be the opposite. Somebody, grows up in New York City and decides they're going to whatever, and then they end up becoming their, high-class liberal parents. People just become their parents, and they can't help it. They try to stay, open-minded and evolved, but they just can't. It's like they just can't. It squeezes and squeezes and squeezes. So I want to read a comment. I love comments, by the way. Bear in mind your comments can be used by me when I do a live or any video. So let's see. I'll try. I don't really want to point this person out. I'm not trying to make fun of this person. They might be watching. If this is you, this isn't an attack on you. It's just, it illustrates exactly what I'm talking about. So this was in regards to my movie, my video, The 5 Rules to Master the Matrix. If you're not familiar with it, I strongly recommend you watch that. And in that video, I talked to you about how the Matrix is like a program. It's a conscious program that responds to you. And based on how you interact with the Matrix, you will get happiness or sadness, misery. I mean, it will give you whatever you tell it to give you. But if you've been programmed and your mind is a slave, you have no idea how you're programming the Matrix. We'll get to it, but just being aware that you're programmed and just being aware that you're sabotaging yourself may not be enough to stop it. In fact, most of the times it isn't. There's more that needs to be done, and we'll talk about that. So let's see. I'm going to try and get to what was most important. Again, I'm not trying to call this person out. This person says, I also figured out that joy is the key ingredient in life rather than happiness, for example. That's unfortunately the one thing I almost never experience. And it's the main thing I'm wishing for. So I did respond to that because that's a very clever way of avoiding that you're in a lot of pain. And that's a very clever way of, the unconscious. It's a very clever way of the unconscious to talk you into staying right where you are. It's just keeping you in it. And that's a way of just surrendering to being miserable. And I understand, because you don't know the way out. You've been trying to break out of your misery, whatever that is, poverty, sadness, loneliness, whatever it is, you've been trying to break out of it, and no matter how hard you try, it doesn't seem to change anything, right? See, did I turn the, yeah, I did. I thought I didn't turn the volume up. I wrote back and I said that joy is happiness. So to say joy is the key but not happiness, I've heard that quite a few times over the years as I've been teaching this, that what you need to do is follow your soul desire, and the way you know what your soul desire is that your soul, when you think about the thing that your soul wants to do, you will have an instant feeling of joy. It may not last. In fact, sometimes it doesn't last very long at all. But it's sort of like a flash of joy when you think about it. It's like a reaction, almost just a physical, instinctual reaction when you think about it. Right now, I think about surfing and I immediately get happy. And then I get sad because the conditions aren't very good and I haven't surfed in a while. But the idea of surfing gives me happiness. So to say that joy is the key but not happiness, that's, you're screwing with your own mind. That's you're BSing yourself. Probably because you don't think that you can get happiness. So what I heard in that, when I heard this person say that, is like, they're trapped. They're trapped in their programming. And it's sad, but the programming is extremely, extremely difficult to break out of. And it's very malleable, and it's incredibly insidious. And when you start to move in a direction that takes you out of how you have been programmed, and your mind has been programmed, your mind will counteract it in some way. And this is a good example. It comes to the awareness that joy is the key, but not happiness. And that's just another way of saying that happiness is the key, but not happiness. Joy is the key, but not joy. And this comes from, if you're miserable, I'm going to give you a blanket statement here, okay? So your specifics in your life are going to be, everybody's got their own specifics. But generally speaking, if you are unhappy in your life, if you're poor, if you're miserable, it means that you are in conflict with your deepest soul desire. Your programming, your hard drive has been programmed to talk you out of living your soul desire. And if you boil it down enough, if you really, really, and you might not see this on the surface, but if you really, really, really dig, sometimes it'll take a while, but if you dig deep enough, you'll find out that the reason why that you are fighting with yourself about doing the thing that gives you the greatest joy is because you're afraid that you won't be loved. Example in my life. My dad was a brilliant physicist. Brilliant. He was a major player in the space race. If you remember, 60s and 70s, getting to the moon first before the Russians, my dad was a big part of that. And before that happened, he developed satellites. Satellites, at one point in his life, may still be true, I have no idea, but at one point he was the man who had designed more satellites than any one man in the world. And his satellites are still in the Smithsonian, to my knowledge. Brilliant man. So, the level of success that he achieved in his chosen field, nobody, there's no threat. There's nobody that could have threatened that. But he was so insecure, sadly enough, that didn't make him feel okay. His programming enslaved him to feel insecure. And even though he achieved the ultimate in his field, he was at the top. I remember being told after he died that they were still trying to figure out some of his mathematical equations about things, that he was on just a completely other level. But because of his insecurity, if I did anything of note, Like if I achieved something that got attention, he became very insecure. So much so that he'd drink himself into a stupor. He was an alcoholic, and then he'd sit me down, and then he'd start acting like he was interested in what I was doing, and then he would compare himself to me. I was like a 10-year-old kid, and he'd compare himself to me about how much smarter he was than I was. So the programming for me was very clear. I better not be excellent. I just need to be mediocre. I had to be smart, and I had to do well in school, but I couldn't stand out, because if I stood out, I was going to threaten my dad, and my dad wouldn't love me. Now, that was the programming that got into me, and by the time I was an adult, I was out there looking to become a big movie star. And I founded a theater company, and I was in some movies. Here's me, and I think pretty much the only movie that ever got to the big screen. I mean, that's not true. I had some tiny roles in some movies that went to the big screen, but this one got to the big screen. That was me playing a kickboxer in 2000, and it hit the big screen for a maximum of about 30 seconds. And then 9/11 happened, and nobody wanted to see movies about violence, so that movie just went straight to video, went to Blockbuster. For months I was taking people to Blockbuster so they could see. In fact, I have it. I should probably go get it and show you the DVD of it. That was as close as I got to being famous. But one of the reasons why I never did, now I don't want to do it, but the reasons why I never did is because on an unconscious level, I was programmed to just be talented and mediocre. And that was the best I could do, because if I did any more than that, then I made my dad insecure, and then he wouldn't love me anymore. Now, I wasn't thinking that at all. I was thinking, why is life doing this to me? I'm trying so hard. That it must be because I'm too talented. I am such a talented actor, and there's some truth to that. I'm such a threat to the powers that be that, that became what I told myself. That's why I'm not making it. But looking back on it, I sabotaged a bunch of opportunities. Because I was programmed. But if you were to talk to me, I would have looked you straight in the eyes without any lying or, without thinking anything differently. And I would tell you, no, I'm doing absolutely everything. I'm busting my rear end. It doesn't make any sense why I'm not succeeding. That's just Hollywood. And while all of those things can be true and can be said about Hollywood, truth is that I sabotaged myself because I was programmed to do so. And no matter how, this might not be completely true, but so far, what I'm about to say has proven to be true. There are two things that you cannot avoid, that your unconscious mind will always make the decision for you. You won't be able to change it. One is who you marry, and the other one is what you do for a living. So if you're in a job you can't stand, your unconscious mind has made that decision for you. You're a slave to it. Good news is you can learn to outgrow that. You can change that if you're able to become conscious. So you have to become conscious of what is unconscious. You have to become conscious of the ways that you have been programmed to be miserable. And you have to become aware of who it is you're trying to protect, or who it is you're trying to gain love from. If you don't become aware of that, you are doomed to continue to keep playing out that sad, like this person said, it's a very sad thing. But I experienced it, so I'm not judging it, because I was also there. This could have been me, which was, I also figured out that joy is the key ingredient in life rather than happiness. That's unfortunately the one thing I almost never experience, and it's the main thing I'm wishing for. So that's a very sad place to be, that the main thing you want in life is to be happy, and you can't be. And it's very sad because this person thinks, because that sounds very philosophical, that they're taking a philosophical approach to it. Well, you can't have everything. Life isn't always orgasms and puppies and and all that. So I mean, it is what it is. But it's really a way of staying miserable. And if you understood that the reason why you make yourself miserable is to please somebody else, if you can become aware of that, that my whole life is about pleasing somebody else, even when those people are dead. Miserable old people in old folks' homes are still trying to please their parents. You know, like on the battlefield, you know, one of the main things that last words you hear from guys dying on the battlefield is mommy. When my mom passed away, I wasn't there, I heard about it, but when she was passing away, she, of course, she went senile, as many old people do. God willing, knock on wood, and the creek don't rise. I hope that doesn't happen to me, but hey, man. But she called for her mother, and she, the caretaker came in, and she said, "Oh, my mom is coming. My mom is here. I just talked to my mom." Now, maybe she did. For all I know, my grandmother, her soul may have come in and communicated with her. But it's interesting that that's where she went. First place she went is she wanted to talk to her mother. And she thought she was a little girl. Same thing, interestingly enough, that my grandmother, when she passed away, the same thing. She thought she was a young girl again, was talking about her mother. It's because that's what you're seeing there is the hard drive of the individual is starting to break down, and the most fundamental program is the only one that's left, which is about pleasing mom and dad, getting mom and dad's love. And so that's what I wanted to point out to you, that you are a prisoner of your own programming, and that none of us are born into this world free. I should say none of us grow up into this world free. You're lucky if you have parents who program you well, then you're lucky, but you're still a slave to your programming. But I was just looking at the birds. The good thing is, if you have parents that love you, then they will program you to enjoy your life. So what was I going to talk about? I was going to say that, as I said earlier, knowing what you've been programmed is the first thing that has to happen, and that's what I mean when I say you must become conscious. You must become conscious of what is in your unconscious, the part of your mind you are not aware of. Part of your mind you are not aware of, you are unconscious. So you can't look me in the face and tell me, "Oh, I know." If somebody says to you, "Wow, you really come off like an angry person," and if 3 or 4 people say, "Yeah, whenever I'm around you, I just get this vibe that you're this really angry person," and if you go, I'm really not an angry person," then that would indicate you were unconscious, you were unaware of something that's happening inside of you. So we have to become unaware. Sorry, Freudian slip. You have to become aware of what you are currently unaware of, but that's not enough. Knowing, for instance, if I were to go back into my life and go back to age 28, when I was running a theater company and working 2 jobs and ending up literally in the hospital from too much stress and not eating enough good food and sleeping and all that, and being so angry that I wasn't a movie star yet. If I were to go back to my 28-year-old self and say, "Here's what's going on, what you're really trying to do with mom and dad is this, and you're still trying to, you're sabotaging yourself," I would have gotten furious and said, "How can you say I'm sabotaging it? I've got this theater company I've co-founded. I'm teaching acting classes. I'm writing movie scripts. I'm making my own movies. What the hell do you mean?" I would have gotten furious at myself. That's because we protect our unconscious. But even if I were able to sit down and explain to myself and have my 28-year-old self go, "Wow, I didn't realize that," that wouldn't change it, because I didn't have the power. I didn't have the power to make the changes in my life, to choose what I wanted to be and what I wanted in my life. Because you can have everything you want. Here's the rule. You can have everything you want. The problem is knowing what it is you want. Most people, they think they know what they want, but it's not really what they want. What you think you want oftentimes is what you've been programmed to believe that you want. I want a big house. I want to win the lottery. I want, I want two model, bikini model wives. I want a boat. No, you don't. You think you want those things because you've been programmed to think those are the things that you need. Or I want nothing. Here's one I hear a lot. I want to annihilate myself. I want to follow spirituality so I can annihilate my awareness. I can annihilate my consciousness. Any of you, does that sound spiritual to you? It's not. Nobody wants to annihilate their consciousness. That's called suicide. You're spiritualizing your desire to escape your pain. That's not spiritual at all. So being aware of what you've been programmed to do doesn't necessarily give you the power to change it. The thing that gives you the power to change it is power. So first comes the awareness and second comes the power. That's what this 90-day challenge is all about, by the way. So there's my spiel for today. I was just thinking about that and I thought I would go ahead and make a video. This is a question and answer. So the way to interact with me best is to write a question. For me to see it, you write the word question so that I can see it, and then you write out the question. And if it's an honest question, I may answer it. But be prepared. I may not give you the answer that you want. My main goal is to help you find out what your real question is. So sometimes you think you know what the question is, and I can see underneath that there's really another question you're trying to ask. So I am going to try and help you as best I can, as quickly as I can, which may mean I may psychoanalyze you and tell you what I think is really going on with you. Joy is not optional. Welcome to the channel. This is a question and answer. So the best way to interact with me is to ask a question. I tend to avoid, if somebody just makes a big statement, I tend to avoid it. If there aren't any questions, that's not a good thing, because then I'll come back and I'm going to pick that apart. I'm just letting you know that's how I work. And if you don't want that, then, always form it in a question, an honest question, and that's when you'll get the best connection with me. So I don't see any questions here. One question, finally one question down at the bottom. Dakota Spruel. Let's see, was there a question up here? No. Dakota Spruel question, how did Norse paganism find you? How did Norse paganism find me? You mean how did I become interested in it? I don't even know that I would give myself the name Norse paganism. See, this is what I mean. Now I'm going to analyze what you just said. So paganism, I don't like that word. The word pagan and heathen are actually, they're bad words. They're words used to denigrate people. The word pagan is a Latin word, which means country dweller. That's a nice way of calling somebody a redneck. An uneducated hillbilly redneck is a pagan. And that came about because, of course, Rome was a polytheist society. And people worshipped the many gods because they've been doing that. Everybody, every society everywhere, when you get down to it, they're polytheists and shamans. And so Rome was that way as well, until they started converting to Christianity. And the elite, upper class in the cities, they were the first to, because that was the thing to do. That was that was the trend, obviously. And somebody who was behind the times, who lived out in the country, who wasn't educated, who didn't understand what was going on, they were called pagans, the country dwellers. And it was just assumed that if you were a country dweller, you had these polytheist superstitions. So I don't like that word. You're asking me how did I get, but I understand. You didn't ask for me to analyze that. But I like for us to be aware, and words have power. So understanding words is something that's helpful. So the word paganism I don't like, but so you're asking me how did I get involved in the ancestral tradition of my ancestors, which is I'm partly of Norse ancestry. That I talk about in my book. Again, if you want to see my books, you can go to courses.thunderwizard.com, and I explain that in general in the book, The Thunder Wizard Path, I believe. It's the Path of the Thunder Wizard or the Thunder Wizard Path. I don't even remember exactly the name of the book. And I give you a blow-by-blow of exactly what happened, how the Norse gods revealed themselves to me, and how I decided to follow them. Short answer is that I have been led ever since I walked away from Christianity at early 20s. I have been led to many indigenous spiritual paths that have an unbroken connection into prehistory. I'm making that distinction as opposed to Western magic or Wicca or things like that have been invented or created, neo-heathenism, those kinds of things. Those are things that have been created in modern times. In my experience, they lack power. They lack power because they no longer have a connection to the transmission of the lineage, the ancestors. So I had done a bunch of different things. I ended up getting involved in Taoist mysticism, Chinese mysticism, martial arts, and Qigong and meditation. And what the hell, you guys? Enough with the loud cars. And then I came across a West African shaman who taught me his drumming tradition. Then I got involved in Kundalini Yoga. Then I got involved in Vedic mantra. And then what happened was I wanted to go further in my studies. And long story short, what ended up happening is I took a walk in the woods and I said, I want to learn more. If there's any masters of my ethnic heritage that want to teach me, I'm open. I thought I was Celtic at the time I said that. I thought I was of Celtic origin. Next thing I know, I'm being led down this path and the Norse gods are appearing to me, and I'm reading the Norse mythology and finding out that they've done everything that all these other people have done, and that my ancestors used to do the same stuff that all these other people are doing. And I now want to honor those teachers as well, those spiritual teachers that now have taught me all kinds of things about the shamanism and the indigenous practices of my ancestors. That's what drew me to it. All right, let's see what else. Infinite 369, if you have a question, please write the word question. Let me also just say, I'm in a good mood today, so I'm not going to give you a big hard time about it. But I prefer to answer questions about what I'm talking about or what I teach. So when you ask me questions about things I don't talk about or don't teach, it tells me that you're not paying attention or you haven't watched my videos. And I normally will give a spiel about, pay attention to what we're talking about, stay on topic. Is coronavirus really exist? Yeah. Not only does it really exist, but just in the past couple of weeks, 2 of my friends in California have come down with it. Yeah, it's offensive to me that you even asked the question. And it saddens me that if you believe that it's actually some kind of fake plot at this stage of the game. I mean, I'll give it to you, a year ago when it first came onto the scene. You want to play that game, fine. But with everything that's been happening now all over the world, to even ask that question is sad. It's very sad. It's not a sick elitist joke. Come on, you guys, it's time to grow up. Seriously, grow the fuck up. It's time to stop being victims. It's time to stop being little kids. It's time to be an informed adult and know the difference between projecting your feeling of being a trapped victim and listening to all the QAnon and all the nonsense, and so you can feel justified in what a victim you are, and learn the difference between that and actually being an informed adult. Because people are dying. Two of my friends look like they're going to be okay. But, people are fucking dying here. So knock the shit off. Seriously, grow the fuck up. And I say that with love. All right, let's see. RCP ashtray. I still want to know what that means. Question: when individuals who are so-called, quote, spiritual, unquote, try to make the ego a bad thing, is that individual at risk of not fulfilling their orlog? Well, that sounds like you've come up with that opinion. And so I appreciate that. You're sharing your opinion in a respectful way, because I've asked people to ask a question. I don't have too much of a problem with that. It is true that there is, the ego is not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with a strong, healthy identity. Without it, you can't function. And that's, the word ego simply means I in Latin, ego. And in Greek too, ego. And in Old English, ek, I. So there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with having an ego. People who badmouth the ego, that's their projection of them hating themselves. Again, this is why you run into a lot of people who want to use spirituality to destroy their identity, to destroy their essence, to destroy their ego. And that's coming from their desire to commit suicide. That's their desire to escape. And that's not spiritual at all. But this is a result of what Christianity has brought. Western people, when they read the Vedas, or when they read the myths, or when they, read the Tao Te Ching or other things like that, they reinterpret it based on their Western mindset, and they turn, merging with emptiness, they actually interpret that as annihilating your ego. And that's not at all what that means. It's a whole different thing. So are they at risk of not fulfilling their orlog or their destiny or their soul desire? Well, yeah, anything that separates you from yourself, your true self. There's the Atman. There in Norse mythology, Odin sacrificed himself, little s, to himself, big S. He sacrificed himself to himself. And what the Christian thing to do was to annihilate your ego to Jehovah or to Jesus. And that's that self-denial. It's not just self-denial, it's a form of suicide. And so, and the whole Christian religion is about, ritually sacrificing your ego, your truth, your identity, your joy for the Almighty. And so, when I read the quote earlier about the person who says, I realized joy isn't the same as happiness, and I said, no, it is. It's the same thing. That's also part of our Western society, where we've been taught that in order to be spiritual, you can't be happy. And I can remember in church as a little kid, being told to carry your cross, and people coming up and giving testimonials about how they were living this way and living that way, but then God called them to go be, a missionary somewhere, and to, just be poor and miserable and, live in filth and, try to force their religion down other people's throat. And yes, it's a hard existence, but, I'm sacrificing my ego to God on the altar, to God. So all of that stuff comes from that. And yes, of course, if you live like that, you're not going to live out your soul desire, which is your orlog, your destiny, your origin law, what you came here to do. Infinite 369, welcome to the channel. Please write the word question before you ask a question so I won't miss it. And again, ask questions about what I teach. I'm not talking about veganism today, and I don't have any videos about veganism. Your question, do I have to be vegan to be fully awakened? There's an ED after that, fully awakened. Do you have to be a vegan? No. Short answer, no, you don't. Zerlath, question. In fact, there are plenty of vegans who are the most unconscious people I've ever met. And there's plenty of meat eaters who are also very unconscious. There are some meat eaters, well, many meat eaters who are very conscious, and there are many vegans who are very conscious. In other words, what you eat has nothing to do with it. Unless, of course, what you're eating is actually unhealthy for you. That's a whole other subject. Zeralath, question, did pre-Roman Indo-Europeans dislike cities for themselves? Yeah, I think all of them did. The reason why we ended up having cities is because whenever you had people who were living in nature, so people who were hunter-gatherers or subsistence farmers, there was usually a combination of that, subsistence farming and then hunter-gatherers. And in other words, you're living in your environment and you have to live in balance with that environment. Those people were always shamans and they were always polytheists. And it didn't make any sense. If what you needed was room for your livestock and room for the wild animals, and you needed to have the fish and the deer and the quail and whatever else you hunted and ate, and if you needed to go around and gather herbs and things like that, then you needed to live out in the open. You didn't want to be smashed together. But we know from we know that the pre-Christian Germanic tribes in Europe, according to Tacitus, the Roman historian, he says that they chose not to live in cities, that they always had big spaces between them and their neighbors, and they lived, next to rivers and lakes and, things like that in a very natural setting. So the only time that you have cities is when somebody gets the bright idea to figure out how to grow more food than they need. Now, I got nothing against that either, because maybe there's a famine that's coming, etc., etc. But they learn how to mass grow, wheat or something like that, grains. And so in order to store all that grain, which is maybe 10 or 20 times more than what you need to survive, you have to put it somewhere. So they put it in these big grain silos. Now all of the other tribes around you start going, wow, those guys are hogging they got all this grain they're not eating. We're hungry now. Well, might as well just go steal their grain. They go, and so now you've got to protect your grain from the other tribes out there that want to steal your stuff. So then the farmers have to become soldiers. So the soldiers guard the granaries, but now there's nobody to farm. So those soldiers go out and conquer those other people that have been stealing from them, turn them into slaves, and now those guys do all of the farming. And now they've got more land to farm from, and then they have bigger grain silos. And so then the people now who used to be farmers are now warriors and kings, and so they make these cities and they wall themselves in case those slaves rebel, and then they're protecting their grain and they're walled in. Now they're no longer living in context with their natural environment, which means that they stop seeing the earth, nature, as being sacred, and they stop worshiping mountains and streams and the god of this and the god of that, and they start making idols. The gods start looking like people, and now they start wearing beards, and now the gods are wearing the same clothes that they are, and then you end up having an empire. And that's how empires start. And then you start doing really stupid things, like you put your geese and your pigs in the same stall, because now you have limited space because you're living in a city. And so underneath your house, you put all the animals together. And then what ends up happening is that the geese, who have these viruses that you're immune to, they get transferred over to the pigs, and then the pigs, it mutates in the pigs, and now the pigs give it to you. And that's how you end up with pox, and you end up with the flu, and you end up with the cold, and you end up with all these things that when civilized people, quote, came over to the New World, it decimated all of the native people because they had no defense against those diseases, because they didn't do stupid things like put pigs in with geese. See what empires do? All of that. All that stuff comes from the selfish desire to have more than what you need. If you live in balance with nature and you believe that nature gives you what you need, you never, hunt more than you need or grow more than what you need. And there's a equanimity and things balance out. Things are healthy and people are happy for the most part. Nicola Karma has just proposed marriage to me. Well, Nicola, unfortunately, I'm over here in Australia. So unless you live not only in Australia, but in the city where I'm living, I can't marry you. But, you might help me out because then I can become an Australian citizen. So, but thank you for the offer. I appreciate that. Let's see, 7LVX quadruple 7 question. What's the ideal way for parents to raise their kids? That's a huge question. Do you have kids? Is it possible to program your child towards awareness and away from slave mentality? Yes, it is. That's a great question. I'm glad that you asked that. So what has to happen first, though, is that you need to become aware, because what all parents do, all parents want to raise their kids right. There's no parent that consciously goes, I am going to fuck that kid up. Nobody does that. But they do. And that's because they're not aware. So the first thing you need to do is become aware. How have you been programmed? And that means if you need to, go see a therapist, go see a psychologist. It means, get a spiritual teacher. It means doing meditation, doing some kind of spiritual work or some kind of psychological work or self-help, or I don't care what it is, Alcoholics Anonymous, or I don't care what the hell it is, but some way where you really take a look at yourself and you go, how have I been programmed? What did my parents program me to do to please them in order to make them feel loved? What aspect of society? Do I think that in order to be happy, I'm supposed to be a this, that, or the other thing? Is a good person somebody who works, 60 hours a week? Is that what a good person is? Well, that's what I'm going to do. You have to become aware. And do you think that because your dad told you that? And he said, nobody makes it in this world unless they work hard. You got to be a valuable part of society. So you can't lie around watching TV all day. What was it? How were you programmed? That's step number 1. And then step number 2, concurrently with that, is from the moment your kids are born, your focus is to say, I want to know who that child is, not what I want them to be. The picture of, Mother Mary holding Jesus, as much as I'm not a Christian, that's an iconic symbol of the true mother. And so a true mother, and only a mother can do this. A true mother, when they're looking in the child's eyes, a true mother, their only agenda is, who is this? Who is this that I'm holding? And so the child is looking back up into, Mother Mary's eyes, and what's happening is that he's seeing himself. This is why when you hold little babies, they look up at you. They're trying to figure out who they are. They're looking in your eyes for you to mirror that. And your job is to sit there with love, without judgment, without agenda, and mirror back to them who they are. When your kids have feelings, as they get older and they start having a lot of feelings, you don't shame them out of their feelings. If little Jimmy is crying and he says he hates you because you won't let him have another cookie, instead of shaming him for that, you give him a hug and you say, I totally understand. I still love you. I can't give you a cookie, but I still love you. And you let him say how angry he is, and you don't tell him, don't you talk back to me, mister, unless they're being, really rude. Let him have his feelings and teach them, say, you can tell me whatever your feelings are. As long as you're respectful and loving to me, I can listen to anything you have to say, no matter how negative. If they're crying, you don't talk them out of crying. You give them a hug and you give them a kiss and you say it's okay. When they accomplish something that makes them happy, you celebrate and you teach them, because kids are like dogs. Dogs respond to rewards. If you give a dog a reward, he'll keep doing that over and over again. The unconscious mind is like a dog or like an infant. And when they do something that makes them happy, you celebrate and you reward them. You hug them and you kiss them and you say, I'm so proud of you. Always do what makes you happy. I'll give you a good example. There was a book, I can't remember what the name of it. It was a book I read probably 20 years ago. It was about a Taoist monk, who lived on one of these Taoist mountains, and, he came out of the mountains and he got married and he had a child. And the child was young. I don't know how old it was. It was really young, maybe 4 years old or 5 years old or something like that. And he had this thing of wanting to know, how things were made and what was at the bottom. So he would take things apart. And so I think there was a brick or something in the building that was loose. So he pulled the brick out and he started like digging into the building. And if I remember correctly, the landlord came out and scolded the child for that. And the Taoist guy immediately went, and in his very, non-threatening way, he said, oh, forgive me, I'm sorry for my son doing that. We'll fix that. And then when the guy wasn't there, then he together with him said, let's look and see what's in there. Because he saw that the kid was just really curious. And so instead of the kid doing it by himself, then he started, if I remember the story correctly, he started finding things with the boy to open up and to figure out what was inside of it. And that way the kid was able to be himself and at the same time learn how to look at things and peer into things without being destructive. Whereas what most parents would have done is they would have gotten embarrassed, because the landlord got upset and would have scolded the child, and don't you ever do that again. Bad, bad. And so a real parent doesn't do that. A real parent lets the kid be who they are and rewards them for being who they are. You don't project any of what you want on them. You let them be who they are. I've said this over and over again. If I was, dating somebody, and if they were to look me in the face and say, I'm feeling murderously rageful at you right now because you said this and that made me feel this way. If they were able to have their feelings and tell me their feelings without attacking me or without trying to hide or push them down, if they could just have their feelings and share them with me, I'd pull out a ring and say, marry me. Because that tells me that that's how that person's going to be, in the worst possible times. And that's what you want. It's great when they love you, but at some point everybody's going to hate you, whether it's your wife or your husband or your kids, or at some point people are going to hate you. And so when they hate you, you want them to act in a constructive, loving way for themselves and for you. So that's how you raise your kids. And you take a really hard look at yourself and say, where am I acting like my parents? My parents used to do this to me, and am I doing that to my kids? And where am I, wanting to project onto my kids how to be? And if your issues come up, for instance, like in a perfect world, if my dad had seen me as a kid accomplish something that, got me a lot of attention. If he had the ability to go, wow, I'm feeling really insecure. I'm feeling really jealous. I'm really wanting to shame him out of that. If he had the ability to then go take himself aside and work through that and go, oh, that's because my dad this and my dad that. I'm not going to do that to my kid. Then that's okay. Kids are going to show you how you've been programmed. And so it's your responsibility to listen to what comes up in you and not just knee-jerk react. Listen and go, wow, what is this feeling? I'm really wanting to shame my kid right now. Why? Really take a look at yourself. Let your kids be your teachers. Okay, let's see what else. Looks like we got a lot of people here who are new to the channel because they're asking questions that are pretty obvious. Infinite 369, I need you to do two things. If you want to ask a question, write the word question. See the question right above yours? Somebody wrote the word question and then wrote a question. I need you to do that. And I need you to write whole sentences, unless English is not your first language. I don't know if it is or not. But it's hard to tell from that what you're asking. I do ayahuasca 2 times question mark. I don't know what you're asking. Are you asking me, should you do it twice? Should you do it at all? You did it 2 times and now what? You have to be more specific. I don't know what that question means. The short answer, don't do ayahuasca at all. I have a video on, you can go search for marijuana. And I talk about all kinds of entheogens and why, if you want to be spiritually empowered, you don't do it. See what else? LC, personally, I believe it's fake. Well, again, what? Don't assume I know what you're talking about. I just spent 20 minutes talking about somebody else. But I'm assuming you think that that COVID is fake. So let me lovingly just kick the crap out of you. It has nothing to do with what you personally believe. Your rights about what you personally believe are meaningless here. That is what you say. Now, just by writing that, I know 2 things about you. Your parents shamed you, and you feel like a victim. So much so that you don't even like having somebody take away your right to believe arbitrarily whatever you want to believe. And I've had this discussion, before the whole COVID thing came out. I remember having a discussion with somebody who believed that the world was flat and got really upset and want to talk about they're lying to us and they're trying to, and I tried to get back on the track of that's not really what's important. What's important is science and facts. To which that person responded and said, I believe I have the right to choose whatever I want to believe. And I said, not when it comes to facts. You don't. The world is either flat or it is round. Or the world is either flat or it's not flat. That's not up for debate. You want to believe that because you have a victim mentality and you want to feel justified in fighting against people telling you what to believe. Now, at that point, I said there's a lot of consequences to that. But this is even more consequential. Because here you are being told by people who actually get the disease, are saying this is a real thing, and people are dying from it. So if you truly want to be awakened, and I can see by the little, little picture there for your avatar, you've got this awakened person. If you truly want to be an awakened person, then your first priority is to want to know the truth, not what is convenient based on what makes you emotionally happy. I already know that it makes you emotionally happy to think about they're doing it to you, they're lying to me. I already know you feel you can't believe anybody, and there are people out there, elites and so, who are telling you what to do, and you're this little victim, you're this little baby who has no choice. Little babies don't know what truth is. They have to be told. You're not a baby. More than likely, you're an adult. You have the ability to think for yourself and figure out for yourself. And demanding that you have the right to personally believe this or that is meaningless if the end result is that people could die based on your behavior. So you need to grow the fuck up. It's time to stop demanding that you have the right to personally believe whatever you want and actually find out the fucking truth. Because your actions could kill people. Now, if I'm wrong, then you've got nothing to lose. For instance, wearing a mask, you've got nothing to lose. Except, one person said being forced to wear a mask is the same as rape. Really? Being forced to wear a mask is rape to you? That tells me that's somebody who's been so disempowered, whose parents so victimized them. And I guess the sad part is how sad that you've been so victimized, so shamed by your parents, that you even the thought of something that you don't know, you can't figure out what the truth is, you can only go with the people who tell you you're a victim. And you are a victim. I've told you, you're a victim of how you've been trained as a kid. And there are things that you are being a victim of. One, you are being a victim of the oil companies. The oil companies have an agenda to make quadrillions of dollars off of you and everybody else by telling you that human-caused global warming is a fraud and a hoax. They have a monetary incentive to lie to you. Now, how do I know that is? Because science has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that we live in a closed system. And if you keep introducing warm air, it gets hotter and hotter. It's just common sense. And it's been proven. So who's telling you that it's false? The people who stand to gain quadrillions of dollars. And then those people put tons of money into politicians' bank books. And so those politicians then have a monetary agenda to perpetuate the doubt. Well, we haven't proven it yet, or no, that's a hoax, and the difference between an actual conspiracy and a false conspiracy theory is that the actual conspiracies, you can follow the breadcrumbs. The false conspiracy theories, like the ones that say that COVID is a scam, it doesn't serve anybody to do that. It doesn't help any economies. It doesn't help anybody. But in order to be able to tell the difference, you have to be educated. This is why it's good to be educated. It's why it's good to go to college and learn something, because then you learn critical thinking. And why you have to analyze your own emotional responses to anything people say. For instance, if we're talking about people on the far right, you can fill them full of fear by talking about, those foreigners. Those foreigners are going to come over with their, whatever it is, and they're going to take away your jobs, and they're going to do this. And you can start all of this fear mongering, and that's okay. They're okay if you talk about that. But if you talk about this pandemic and that there's a virus and that people are going to die, they're going to go, I don't want to be bombarded with all of that fear. Well, it's just which fear makes them feel better. They like the fear that makes them feel like I have to fight against, these people I don't like. But they don't like the fear of being told that there's a virus that could kill them or their loved ones. They love the idea of the fear that when somebody says, no, you don't understand, the liberals are trying to brainwash you into thinking that there's global warming and it's a fraud and a hoax. They love that fear. But the fear of if we don't stop pumping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, we're going to completely destroy the environment. Oh, I don't want it. Don't give me all of that negativity. It depends on how you respond. And if you don't have the ability to know how you respond to your own emotional reactions, you will continue to be a slave. So the irony here is that you want to tell me that COVID is fake because you saw my title, which says you're a slave, which means you don't want to be a slave. You want to be free. And here you are just admitting to me how enslaved you are to the fear that you choose and your need to believe what you believe, regardless of whether it's true. You just want to have the right to personally believe something. Well, I don't give a shit what you personally believe. I give a shit on what is actually true. And in this case, your right to have your personal belief is meaningless. About who you worship, what music you want to listen to, where you want to live, what kind of food you want to eat, how you want to do your hair, that's your own personal thing. Who you want to marry, if you want to have homosexual or heterosexual or bisexual, that's your own personal deal. Your personal beliefs completely are yours. Whether or not there is a virus that is killing people, your personal belief means nothing. Got it? That's the adult way. You want to grow up and not be a child? You want to not be a victim? That's how it's done. Having said that, I know how challenging it can be. Tripped apart, I'm not even going to respond to that. Everything I just said, apply to yourself. Just cut and paste. Raymanovich question. Many last nights I've been having recurring nightmares or unpleasant dreams. That's unusual because usually I don't dream those kinds of dreams. Any idea what that can mean? It could be all kinds of things. It could be something astrological. Could be Mars causing problems. You know, Mars is having a tough time right now because he has just come out of retrogression in Pisces, and now he's going back towards coming from Pisces into Aries, which means he's going to go through what's called a Gandanta point, which is going from water to fire. And Mars, you know, it's going to make him upset. So it could be that. It could be that you've been doing something spiritually, meditative-wise, which is bringing up unconscious fears. This is what I'm talking about. See, now I'm going to go ahead and make an assumption that LC and Tripped Apart have unresolved unconscious issues because of their need to turn this fucking pandemic into some, global conspiracy. There are global conspiracies. This is not one of them. But the need to project that onto something when it's really obvious, if you look at it. When something that's obviously one thing, you have to project it, and just so that you can continue to feel victimized. That tells me that there's unresolved victim mentality in there. That they're not aware. In this instance, they're not aware of what's going on inside of themselves. The whole point is to become aware. Those kinds of nightmares can be indications of you are starting to become conscious of fears inside of you. Now, it becomes difficult because dreams are symbolic. So this is why it's good to have a therapist or a teacher or a shaman to look at what does the symbolism mean. And somebody who knows you. Say, oh yeah, that's your fear of your mom hating you or something like that. So that's what I do. Listen, I still have unpleasant dreams and nightmares. I mean, just the other night, you know, I haven't been a Christian for 30 plus years. I woke myself up in the middle of the night screaming, in Jesus' name, Satan. I had a dream that I was casting demons out. You know, there's still unconscious stuff that comes up to me, and I stop and I go, wow, what's the symbolism? What am I afraid of? So that could be a good thing. That's how I think all dreams should be dealt with, at least first. What else? MR question. Is the psychedelic experience real? I don't know. Again, welcome to the channel. How I know you're new to the channel, asking really general questions like that. And I don't know what that means. By psychedelic, do you mean entheogens? Do you mean the places that people go when they do ayahuasca or something like that? If that's your question, do me a favor, put the time and effort into write the whole question so that I can understand what you want to ask me. And once I know what that is, I'll be happy to help you. Dean Nevins question, out of all the energy work that you teach, is the Houle breath the most empowering for shamanic journeying and lucid dreaming? Well, I haven't tried to guess which exercise is the most empowering for shamanic journeying and lucid dreaming. Having said that, I would say that the Houle breath, if you're new to the channel and you want to learn, by the way, people are asking about psychedelics and ayahuasca, do this. Before you do any of that, I challenge you to do the Houle breath for 1 hour every day for 6 months. So if you don't know what the Houle breath is, I just typed it in there, H-U-U-L breath. Go and type it into YouTube, Houle breath, and you'll see a video of me teaching you how to do it. Do that for 1 hour a day, every day for, 6 months. And after that, if you still feel the need, you have to go do some psychedelic to have an experience. Well, I still don't recommend it, but just see if you can get more from that than other stuff. But I think that is a potentially safe assumption. At the very least, the Houle breath is, without a doubt, an extremely powerful tool which can change your brain and your brain chemistry and your nerves and your nervous system to be able to do that, to be able to journey. Let's see what else. And Infinite 369, again, if you have a question, do me a favor and write the word question. Otherwise, if there's a bunch of people just dropping their opinions, I'll pass by it, and I don't want to miss your question. So please write the word question. Do you think that we should all get a COVID-19 vaccine? Do you think it's safe for humanity? I don't have enough information. I don't know. I've heard arguments on both sides, and we don't have the vaccine yet. So I honestly don't have an answer for you. If I had one, see, this is, all those of you who might think that, I'm just a shill. Here I am going off about how COVID this and that. I haven't made up my mind. I don't know whether or not a vaccine is safe. I don't know. I was a kid. I was inoculated with a bunch of stuff. I mean, I was inoculated with measles and mumps and, all this shit. My dad had polio. I was inoculated for polio. Polio was a fucked up thing. My dad was lucky to survive, and there were things he couldn't do, like he couldn't swallow. He had to turn his neck in order to swallow his food because his swallowing muscle was paralyzed. So when he was eating, he had to go in order to swallow. So these things are fucked up. And so I'm more than happy if I see enough evidence that tells me that a COVID vaccine is safe. I'm going to be the first person to tell you to go get it. But I haven't seen that yet, but I have, and I've heard both sides of the story, and so I'm undecided right now. Infinite 369, I want to be in your 90-day challenge. Go to thunderwizard.com and subscribe. Poke around until you see Warrior 90-day challenge and subscribe, and there you go. You will be part of it. It's that simple. That's what the links are there for. Follow the links if you guys have questions about, how to work with me, or, all the stuff that I have, all of the tools that I make available for you, just besides this channel. Tripped apart. I am out. If you don't see Zeb the bed, okay, bye. See ya. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to tell you what you want to hear? Is that my job? I mean, am I supposed to now feel upset because you don't like what I'm saying, so much so that you're going to stop watching my channel? Is that what you want? So I'm just supposed to believe what you tell me because you have a different opinion? You're more than happy to leave. I'll see ya. Don't let the door hit your ass on the way out. I mean you no personal harm whatsoever, but because my job is to tell you the truth as I know it, I'm going to tell you the truth, even if that means you're going to unsubscribe. What kind of a teacher would I be if your threat to leave my channel is going to make me change what I say? I'm telling you, the victim mentality that drives you to need to believe that. And you're putting some, the 1920 and the 1820 and the 1720, 1620. That proves doesn't prove a fucking thing. It just proves that when you have an agenda to prove to yourself that you're a victim, you'll find whatever information will co-sign that. So let's talk about what research is, because people say, do your research. Research is not reading hundreds of websites or watching hundreds of videos that tell you what you want to hear. Research is looking into both sides of the argument and then doing the homework, even if you don't like it. So let me be clear. Somebody asked me, well, what do I think about a vaccine? What I want to say, what emotionally I want to say is, I can't wait for the vaccine to come out because I would like to see herd immunity, and then borders will open up, and that's what I emotionally want to have happen. So I have an emotional agenda to have somebody convince me that a vaccine is a good thing. Now, because I'm a critical thinker, I know that I have that emotional agenda. And I'm not going to let that blind me. It doesn't threaten me personally that my emotional agenda might not happen. Tripped apart, you are emotionally threatened when I am able to start telling you that COVID is not a made-up pandemic. You're emotionally threatened by that, so much so that you have to threaten to leave watching my channel, and then you have to come up with these seemingly, I mean, you're just throwing out dates. Doesn't mean anything. 19, 20, 16, oh, they all end with 20, so therefore it's planned, and therefore the elite this, and therefore the, and you come up with all this QAnon nonsense that has no actual verifiable anything. But I mean, I can find those kinds of facts for anything I want. I can go and say, oh, this, that, and put things together that sound like they mean something. That doesn't mean anything. I don't know the difference between mRNA and DNA virus. The fact that you do know that doesn't prove anything either. Those are powerful things to know. But I know that you've been listening to somebody tell you this and tell you that and tell you a bunch of other things. Here's a third possibility, which I'm open to, which you're not. And if you really want to be a fucking man or a woman and be strong, then you're willing to listen to a third possibility. The third possibility is that COVID is not a plandemic, but that there is a possibility that somebody might want to use a vaccine that can either make them a lot of money and or potentially be harmful, because some vaccines are harmful. For instance, I'm not pro-vaccine when it comes to the flu virus. The flu vaccine is complete, total nonsense. You know how I know that? Because I heard that from somebody who is actually a vaccine scientist who said it's impossible to be able to synthesize a vaccine for a strain of the flu that hasn't erupted yet. It takes at least a year to be able to synthesize something, and by that time, that strain of the virus is gone and a new one has erupted. And then it goes on to say the chemicals that they use to create it actually will make you more sick and ruin your... Now that's coming from somebody who has a vested interest in that, a scientist who makes vaccines. So that got my attention. I don't know where you're getting your information. I'm willing to bet you're getting your information from an echo chamber that helps you feel like a victim. I'm able to look within myself and know when I have an emotional reaction to something and go, I better not make sure that that emotional reaction is what's going to determine my belief. I already know you're a victim. I already know it. And that's not me trying to judge you. That's me trying to let you become aware. So the third option is vaccines might be really harmful, and there might be somebody out there who is either pressured and or has a financial interest to throw out a vaccine, but it doesn't mean that the virus was created because of that. Can you be able to separate those things? That takes critical thinking. One of the questions you ask yourself is, when is something true and when is something false? In this case, it doesn't have to be either true or false. When is something sometimes true and sometimes false? Sometimes it's true that vaccines can be helpful and keep people from getting sick. And sometimes it's true that even those vaccines can cause reactions in people that can kill them. Sometimes those neutral vaccines can be deadly and sometimes they can be helpful. When is something sometimes true and sometimes false? When is something partially true and partially false? You haven't asked those questions. I know you haven't asked them because you're ready to unconsciously murder me, which is what you mean by I'm out of here, because I am not completely co-signing your victim mentality. You're not even willing to have a conversation that's somewhere in the middle. So see ya. If you're expecting me to constantly co-sign all of your pet things, then I am the wrong place to be. So bye. Have a good one. I said that for the benefit of everybody watching. Cryptopart probably is already gone. But I said that for the benefit of the rest of you. It's really important. You know, this about being trapped, this is what we're talking about. Being a slave, Cryptopart is a slave. Even though he or she may be rebelling against their parents, for example. Let's say their parents are full on, I believe that it's a real thing and the virus is real. That the vaccine is real. Don't tell me. They may be rebelling against their parents, but they can't tell the difference between the emotional need. Rebellion is a way of staying trapped. When you just rebel for the sake of rebelling, when you buy into any conspiracy theory and any conspiracy evidence that cosigns your emotional belief, that's not true rebellion, that's not true freedom. And I'm trying to help you find the way to true freedom. Having said that, I still don't have an opinion on whether or not a vaccine is a good idea because I haven't got enough information yet. Rio Rasta, question. Where'd he go? Rio Rasta, question. How would the world look like if the Roman Empire would have continued until today? It did. It would look exactly like it does now. Because what is Christianity? Let's think about it. So technically the Roman Empire fell. And the way the Roman Empire fell was I have a whole bunch of videos on it. I'll try and do it as concisely as possible. But in the last stages of the Roman Empire, what was happening is that there were Gothic people in northwestern Europe, Germanic tribal people who were being harassed by Mongolians, the Huns, one of those Mongolian tribes were coming in, and they were doing warfare that these guys didn't know how to do. Guerrilla warfare, coming out of the forest with bows and arrows, and then just devastating. And so they, hundreds of thousands, I don't know how many, it was a lot, thousands and thousands and thousands of these Gothic people were seeking refuge. And they wanted to come into the Roman Empire because they knew that these marauding Huns or whatever weren't going to come into Rome. So they piled up on the Roman border in what is now, I believe, Turkey. I believe that's where it was. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, so they piled, at the borders of the Roman Empire, and they said, we want in. We want to become part of the Roman Empire. We'll become part of your culture. We'll do whatever you want. We just want in. We want to get away from these guys. So refugees, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And Rome said, all right, well, let's see. We got to process you. So they created huge concentration camps where these Gothic tribal people came and they were being processed. While they were being processed, the Romans had to feed them. So the Romans ended up giving them, the Romans ended up giving them grain and food, like the government would drop it off, and then the army that's there, would go, look at all that food and look at all that stuff, and then they turn around and sell it. And then they'd sell it to these refugees. So much so that the people had started selling their children into slavery to these Roman soldiers, in exchange for dog meat. While the men of fighting age are off fighting the other tribes, or they're being used, they were forced to fight while everybody's in this giant concentration camp. Long story short, all those soldiers came back trained by the Romans, were now badasses, and they all just up and left the concentration camps, and they went to different places around Rome looking for food, looking for shelter. And everywhere they went, the Roman garrisons would come out and they would wipe out the Roman garrisons, and they'd move from one place to another. They ended up destroying the Roman Empire army until they got to Rome, and then they camped outside of Rome saying, hey, we just want food. And then finally, Rome starved itself out. Somebody opened the gates. They rushed in. They sacked Rome, and there was nothing left. There was no food. There was nothing. And so they just stayed. But what is interesting is that they didn't then turn Rome into a Gothic kingdom. Because if that was the case, people would be speaking some kind of Germanic language in Rome. But instead you had these Germanic tribes like the You've heard like the last name Lombardi, right? That's a Latin name. Langobard. Langobard was a Germanic tribe. It means long beard. The Longbeards. So they threw away their religion, they threw away their culture, they threw away their language. They adopted Christianity and started speaking Latin. And those are the people who took over Rome. And then what they did is they took Roman Christianity and then they started taking it all over the world. So the Roman Empire never stopped. Christianity is the Roman Empire. What we're doing now, I mean, the United States is like the last vestiges of the Roman Empire. The British Empire, it's all the Roman Empire. It hasn't stopped. So it would look exactly like it does today. I heard that the Romans, had the church under control. No, they didn't. They created the church. And they had their own natural religion as well. I don't know where you heard that. That's not my understanding. They threw away, they threw it away because it was just, Christianity was just a much better way to control people. Bharani Ituseng, question. How can I trust myself to be able to understand my unconscious programming and shift my thinking to an empowered state of mind? Excellent question. You can't trust your unconscious. That's what teachers are for. That's what psychiatrists are for. That's what psychologists are for. That's why people go and they bow to the feet of the guru, because the guru is supposed to be able to, point you to your unconscious mind. That's what I'm trying to do, probably unsuccessfully, with Tripped Apart and with Infinite 369. Now, they're not my students. So, they watch my channel. Maybe they like some of the stuff I say. Maybe they like some of the exercises I give, but they're not my students. They're not my apprentices. But that's the job of a guru. The job of a teacher is to reflect back to you what's going on in your unconscious so that you can become aware and then, do the meditations or whatever in order to overcome it. So you can't trust your unconscious mind. That's the whole point. Like again, Tripped Apart. There's no doubt in my mind, Tripped Apart's unconscious is convincing him of all this stuff. Convincing him that he or she needs to go and get only that information which will be the echo chamber to co-sign their victim mentality. They're totally unconscious of it, which is why now they have to point fingers at me. I'm out. You obviously don't know this, you that. They have to point fingers at me because I'm a threat. Then their unconscious mind is trying to keep them. There's a payoff. Your unconscious mind, if you've been programmed to be a victim, which most of us have been, if you've been programmed to be a victim, there is an unconscious payoff. It means people will hold on to their unconscious fear and they'll let it kill them before they let go of it, because the unconscious is trying to save you. When you were a little kid and you lived in a dysfunctional home, whatever the victim mentality was necessary for your survival. Because if you didn't react that way, you wouldn't be able to be accepted and be loved and be able to function in that society. The problem is once you're out from that house and you're an adult, you can't just switch that off and go, okay, I don't need to do all that crazy stuff anymore now. What's real life like? You can't do that. You're continuously being pushed on by that program, whether you're rebelling or whether you're, like I said, a lot of the people that I grew up with, they were hippies and rebels until they got to be 30 or 35. And then the next thing they turn into their parents. They get married and have kids and start going to church and start getting a 401 and start buying a gun and voting for Republicans. And what the hell? What are you doing? It's because their programming is kicked in and they have to follow through with it. But if you ask them, they'll come up with something totally different about why it is. That's how powerful the unconscious mind is. So to answer that question, find a teacher that you trust. Find a spiritual discipline. And it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's Kung Fu or whether it's yoga or whether it's Tai Chi or whether it's swimming or whether it's archery or whether it's something. Find something where you find a discipline, because a disciplined practice helps you to fight against your unconscious impulses. So no matter what it is you're mastering, your unconscious will try and stop you. And so you have to learn to not follow every single unconscious impulse. You have to learn how to have a goal which might be challenging and force you beyond your comfort zone. And that becomes the lesson that you then bring back into life. Again, that's why gurus, teach yoga and things like that. They teach you a discipline, and then on top of that, they counsel you how to, work through your mind and how to overcome your unconscious. That's why it's all put there together. There's a reason for all that. That's why I'm such a big fan of traditional student-teacher traditions and disciplines and relationships. And I don't care what it is, whether it's you're a Zen meditator, or you're wanting to master yoga, or you're wanting to become, whatever it is. Those traditional student-teacher things are really good to help you overcome your unconscious. Okay, let's see what else. Let's see, and then we've got worthless pot-smoking trash. Sorry, your name. You got to change that name. Dumpster Trash 420. Question: is having children good or bad karma? I don't know. I don't have kids, and that's been a decision my whole life, not having kids, because I don't want the negative karma associated with it. I remember making the decision. I was 18 or 19, and I was, I had gone into Christianity. I was studying to be a minister, but I was really thinking about what I went through as a kid and realizing that, my dad was just not a good role model, and my dad was not a good father to me, and he really screwed up, and I was really sad that I didn't have a good dad. I was feeling sorry for myself, and I was sad. And I decided that I became aware that, if he did that, and I knew his relationship with his dad wasn't so good, that, he had been programmed by his dad to be that way, and he did the best he could, which means that I've been programmed by my dad, which means I would do the same thing if I had kids, and I don't want to do that. So I'm just not going to have kids. Now, as it turns out, if you look at my Vedic astrology, I'm not meant to have kids in this life. So having children is neither good or bad karma, but everything you do is going to create karma. So if you live a life where you have a discipline and a practice where you can, again, become aware of what your unconscious is and work towards becoming conscious, then if you choose to have kids, and that's your karma to have kids, then you can have that adventure of learning how to have kids and create good karma. And like I said, use your kids to help you learn about yourself. Have your kids be your greatest teachers about your failings. Okay, let's see what else. Dakota Spruill question: if you sign up to the personal bi-monthly tutoring thing on your Patreon, so that's talking about being an apprentice, there's an apprenticeship slot where you can sign up and you work with me twice a month. Do you do a Vedic astrological reading included with that? Yes, I do. That's the first thing I do. So you have to have an exact time in order for me to do it. But that's the first thing I ask you to do is when you sign up, I will email you, say, welcome, please respond to this with your Vedic astrological or your birth information, and then I give you a link where you can go and schedule your sessions, and then you're responsible for as long as you're subscribed to then schedule your sessions with me. See what else? I could be right. I could be right. No, I could be wrong. I could be right. Oh, I thought the other one was funny. I could be wrong. I could be right. That reminds me of people I grew up with. I could be wrong. I could be right. Question: regards a vaccine. You mean regarding a vaccine? Sorry for I have to correct people's grammar. Regarding a vaccine, you'd be supportive of one which is safe. All right. So first off, if you're going to ask a question, ask an honest fucking question. Don't bullshit me. That's not a question. You've obviously got an agenda that you don't think there is such a thing as a safe vaccine. I'm okay with that. I haven't asked for your opinion. I've already told you that I haven't made up my mind about whether or not first off, you're making an assumption that all vaccines are all toxic, and I don't know that to be true. I know some are, and I know for a fact, like the flu virus vaccine is incredibly toxic. I've heard, and I haven't verified the evidence, but I've heard a lot of evidence that says that they could be. I'm open to that. But please don't give me this passive aggressive bullshit. You have an opinion. I'm totally fine with you having an opinion. A question is when I have the answer to something that you don't. You obviously have an opinion. You're not asking me because you want my advice. You're trying to talk me into your spiel, and you haven't earned that right from me. I don't know you. For all I know, you could be somebody who's got a victim mentality and you can't see real evidence from, the victimized spiel that somebody has. I don't know you well enough. You haven't earned my trust. So I haven't asked for your opinion, so you don't have the right to give it. That's not how this works. This is a question and answer. If you have an honest question, like you want me to answer about something that you don't know about, I am happy. And I find that a loving interaction between us when you ask me an honest question. That I find invasive. I find it inauthentic. I find it controlling and demeaning. Because in your passive aggressiveness, you're trying to demean me because you think that I'm obviously not seeing things right. Let's look at the question. You use quotes a lot. Regarding a vaccine, you'd be supportive of one which is safe? What is safe? Is one which contains ingredients derived from animals, humans? All right, maybe I could be wrong. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I didn't finish the sentence fast enough. Okay, so first, forgive me. I went off on you too fast. Assuming this is an honest question, is one which contains ingredients derived from animals, humans, safe? I don't know. I'm not a scientist. This is the thing. I mean, you can go and listen to a scientist who can explain to you why it's safe, and then you can go listen to another scientist and say why it's not safe. I need to be a scientist to figure that out, and I'm not. So, I mean, again, why are you asking me this? You're asking me a question I've already told you I'm not qualified to answer. How can I possibly know that? The truth is, again, are you asking me this because you honestly don't know and you really want me to help you figure out how to find out? Or are you asking me this question because you have an opinion and you're passive aggressively trying to throw your opinion out? I'm asking that honestly. I don't know. Infinite 369. Hey, do you know David? Okay, so I don't know who again. Infinite 369. This is the fourth time I've said if you have a question, write the word question. If you've been on here this long, then I've also said it's good to ask me about things that I teach. So you're asking me about David Icke. And if you want to ask what David Icke thinks, ask David Icke. Dr. Rashid. I don't know who that is. Maybe I'm supposed to know who that is. I don't know who that is. They both say that this virus is all fake. Well, listen, don't listen to anything David Icke says. David Icke also believes that reptilians are living underneath the earth and that Queen Elizabeth is a reptilian and that there is an underground bunker under a pizza parlor in Washington, D.C. where Hillary Clinton is eating babies. He also believes that. So seriously, you're going to take anything that fucking guy says as meaning something? Seriously? Come on. But yeah, I don't know who that doctor is, but the doctor says it's fake. Well, I can tell you for a fact the fucking virus isn't fake. It makes me want to ask you, Infinite 369, where do you live? Because if you live out in the middle of nowhere, where you live in a small town, or like where I'm living right now, there's no virus here because there's this travel ban, and so I'm in Australia, and this section of Australia, there's no COVID because we've starved it out. There's nobody coming in that has it. So somebody living here, I can at least understand why they would wonder, is it fake or not? Because I don't know anybody who's got it. I don't see it. So it makes me want to ask, do you live out in the middle of nowhere? Do you live out in, some rural place? It also makes me just by you asking me that question that way, makes me think you're not educated. I strongly recommend people get a college education just so that you can learn how to know the difference between, what's bullshit and what's not. The part of the reason that we've got the problems that we have in the U.S. is that we've got a large chunk, almost half of the population of the United States is not college educated, which means they don't know the difference between opinions and journalism. And so a journalist, they don't understand that somebody who has a talk show, a news talk show, and throws out opinions, they don't know that that's not verifiable. That's just somebody throwing their opinion out. As opposed to a reporter who comes in and reports something based on facts that they legally have to back up. Just that, it tells me that you're one of those people you may not even know. You're not educated enough to know the difference. And so David Icke, well, he's a person and he has an opinion, and this other guy, he's called a doctor, he has an opinion, and they both say it's fake. And I'm sitting here telling you, I've got friends in Los Angeles. 2 of them now have COVID. I mean, all you have to do is put a little bit of effort to find out. But, if you can't trust any information that comes to you, then you're going to go, oh, that could be fake or that could be photoshopped. And you don't know the difference. That saddens me. It saddens me when people are so isolated and so afraid that they can't figure out what's true and what's not. And this is very harmful. There's a guy who died. I don't know if you're familiar with it. There was a guy who died who went to a COVID party because he believed that COVID was fake. He believed it was a scam. And so he went to this COVID party, which means everybody showed up and nobody wore a mask. And they were actually trying to get it and prove if it was out there. This guy fucking got it and died. There's another interview of a guy who's pro-Trump, 100% pro-Trump guy, anti-vaccine, anti-COVID, says it's fake. And then his 1 or like 2 or 3 people in his family got it and 2 people died from it. He's still pro-Trump and thinks Trump is great. But, now I realize that the vaccine is real. Grow the fuck up. Seriously, guys. Should we even be having this discussion? It's just so sad that you're so afraid. You're so afraid that you can't trust any information that comes to you unless it stimulates you emotionally. If I tell you, yeah, the elites, there's this pandemic, and not only that, not only do they want to make money off of you through this fake vaccine that doesn't exist, not only that, but they're going to control you with tiny little nano robots that are going to get into your brain, and then they're going to be able to program you through so not only you fucking believe that shit. It's so saddening to me. And here you're talking to a guy who has, I've left my body numerous times. I'm a shaman. I used to do exorcisms. You're talking to somebody who believes in the spirit realm, who believes in the non-physical. So I'm not just some, one of those people out there. I'm one of these guys that's trying to help you spiritually. I'm telling you, if you want to grow spiritually, you've got to learn how to drop all that shit. You've got to learn how to be able to trust what you hear and be able to know when you're being emotionally manipulated, even by people. I think a lot of the conspiracy theories are not done by people trying to manipulate you. They're just a bunch of frightened, uneducated people who, are afraid of everything. And all it takes is one person. Like when somebody called it, the redneck telegraph. All it takes is one person to hear something and then take it a little out of context. Hillary Clinton, I don't know if this is true or not. I think he used this as an example. It might have been true. Hillary Clinton was pro stem cells. Stem cells come from aborted fetuses. So that becomes, oh yeah, Hillary Clinton eats babies to stay alive. And then you say that to somebody else, and Hillary Clinton is worshiping the devil and eating children. Oh, and she's Hillary Clinton. Not only that, I heard she's a reptilian. So the reptilians are eating children. Yeah, and I also heard that she said there's a pizza parlor that she meets with. You mean underneath the pizza parlor, she's eating children and she's a reptilian? This is how this shit comes along. It's just people are so frightened and so fucking uneducated that all it takes is as long as I push those emotional buttons in you, you'll believe any fucking thing I say. I could be so much more popular if I push your buttons. I purposefully don't. Because I wouldn't want to be lied to either. All right, let's see what else. Okay, so I've convinced Infinite 369. I'm glad that you believe me, but don't stop just because I've told you. Actually look at real news sources. Go look at real news, you guys. Let me tell you, you know what the mainstream media is? The word mainstream media means mainstream, means what the majority of people watch. So when you hear somebody use the term mainstream media in a negative way, what they're selling you is the idea that I am part of the minority that's not being fed this mainstream media fake news, right? So mainstream means the majority. Fox News is the most watched cable channel, not the most watched news, the most watched cable channel in the US. You cannot get more mainstream than Fox News. So if you really want to watch the minority that is actually doing the journalism, then you're going to watch one of those other mainstream. You guys are being so manipulated. It's very saddening to me. It saddens me. I wish I could do something to help people. There used to be a law which was, guess what? It was shot down by right-wingers who wanted to have control over the news. And this was shut down a long time ago. But when I was a kid, whenever somebody had a political message or political commentary, by law, there had to be somebody of an opposing party to give an opposing statement. And Republicans, right-wing, rich Republicans went in and got that law struck down so that they could create things like Fox News, where you could just have an entire network of people who just have one political understanding to come from. And then, of course, the mainstream media had to then be pushed on the other side, and now you have them. So you have CNN. They're obviously pro-Democrat. I think that their news that they give is valid, but their opinions are obviously pro-Democrat. And so now you've set it up where you have the left and the right news channels. It's because there are people that are trying to control the information that come to you. And those are the people who are going to be the very ones telling you that the other side is lying to you. And if you're not educated, and if you don't have critical thinking, you won't see it coming. You will respond from your fears. It's time to grow up. Time for all of us to grow up. Let's see what else. Let's see. Consumption of animal humans is usually a spiritual concern in my experience. Well, I could be wrong. I could be right. Let's just follow that. So what if a vaccine is made from, I don't know how they make it. But just because, there could be something that could be derived from living tissue, that doesn't mean that they killed a human or killed an animal to get it. Do you understand that? Again, it tells me that you haven't done really enough research. Find out what vaccines are, how they're made. And there's all different kinds. Find out how they're made. Don't just listen to whatever somebody throws at you. Really got to do more research than that. I did a video, which I think I took down, which was, is COVID vaccine going to be, are you going to be taken over by nanobots? Because I was watching this video of this guy talking about, nanotechnology, and all nanotechnology means is that they took a protein from, a protein from the virus, which doesn't cause illness, but that is one of the proteins that attaches to the cells in the body. And they took that and replicated the protein, and they put that, just the protein, into nano, which means very small, in some kind of thing where they could enter it in the bloodstream, which means that the body recognizes that protein and then it goes and replicates white blood cells to fight off that protein. And that is nanotechnology. But some idiot saw the word nanotechnology and thought it meant that they're putting robots into you. Again, the redneck telegraph. Then he puts a video and then somebody else says, oh yeah, not only that, but they're using nanobots. And they're putting nanobots in your body and they're going to control your mind with nanobots. And that's not what it means. Now, I'm not even saying that having that protein in your body is a good thing or a bad thing because I'm not a scientist, but I know that that in itself just means small. It means that they got this tiny little protein and they have to put it in a really small package in order to put it in your bloodstream. That's all it means. But because you're some guy, you're uneducated, and you don't know the first fucking meaning of what nano is, or you think nano means nanobots, robots. Oh my God, artificial intelligence. So this vaccine is trying to make me a robot. It's trying to connect me to artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is, you know what I mean? This is what I'm talking about. This is the society we live in. It's just really dangerous not being able to get accurate information and having people with a lot of money who have a vested interest in keeping you stupid so they can control you. It's really sad. Really, it is 1984-ish, and it's something we should be worried about. Ed the Wave, question, how can overcoming our non-conscious mind better help us unleash our inner genius? That's a really general question that, that's kind of what the whole video is. So I need your question to be more specific. Ed the Wave, oh boy, COVID-19 is real. I've cremated some of the bodies at my family business, a funeral home. It is real. Thank you for... It still amazes me there are people out there that don't... I mean, with the shit that's going on now, with the numbers, with the amount of deaths, with the amount of people that are getting it, there's still people that think it's fake. It's just amazing to me. Line of Apollo, let's see, that's not a question. So, Line of Apollo, welcome to the channel. So you don't think that education means anything? So let me explain something to you. Education is not arbitrary. You want me to believe that educated is arbitrary. You say many of the educated, quote unquote, really fawn over and eat up anything pundits and talking heads say. What are you talking about? Which pundits are you talking about? Are you talking about the pundits on your news channel, the one that you like, who talk about pundits and talk about talking heads? You mean the people that don't like the other side of the aisle and they talk about how they're feeding you information? You mean them? Or do you also mean the pundits that follow whatever news you follow? You're being way too general here, and that's dangerous. Being way too general. So basically anybody on the other side of a screen who's a pundit, you can't listen to anything they say. Right? It's too general, man. Many of the educated really fawn over and eat up anything pundits and talking heads say. And now suddenly even what the FBI and DHS says is sacred as well. What are you saying? So now you're touting that the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security is sacred? So, the guy who just got fired by Trump because he said this was the safest, you're saying, oh, that must be a lie? I already know, based on that, if I'm reading that right, you have an emotional agenda. Everything you're saying and every piece of information you're going to look for is going to be based on your emotional agenda, which means you're being manipulated. Go back and listen to what I said about where you get information and what mainstream media now is. Now mainstream media is Fox News, which is going to tell you you can't trust the FBI and the DHS. That is mainstream media, because by definition, mainstream means the majority of the stream of people who are watching it. Fox News is the most watched cable channel in the United States. You're getting your information from mainstream media, who only has an agenda to support, at least up until now, the Trump regime. So where are you getting your information from? You do not strike me as somebody who knows how to. Again, I might be reading that wrong, but based on what I just read, it sounds like you're parroting whatever it is that you're told. You can't trust these people, and you can't trust those people. You're using emotionally charged words like sacred. You're putting the word educated in quotes. You're trying to emotionally stimulate people who, if you're not educated, then people who are educated know more than you. That tends to make uneducated people feel insecure. So they'll start talking shit about educated people. They'll start using the word like sacred. They start using words like talking heads. You're not giving me anything specific there. So for those of you listening, I'm using my critical thinking to evaluate whether or not the information line of Apollo is coming from a verifiable source. Based on that, I'm not seeing anything that tells me other than he's got an emotional agenda. So everything he says now I got to put on hold because I can't tell that he's aware of what his emotional agendas are. I have an emotional agenda and I'm clear about it. Like I said, I have an emotional agenda about vaccines. I want a vaccine to be a good thing. I am hoping to hear that somebody says a vaccine has been made and it's safe, but I don't know that. My emotional agenda is not going to determine what I choose to believe. That's the difference. You've got to be able to know what your emotional agendas are. I don't think Liev Apollo knows what his emotional agendas are. Ed the Wave says it's been hard on us death care workers. Yeah, because you get to see the bodies that come in. Nimsaj KIA, all caps. He's going to yell at me in all caps. Question, is it true that if we have a high vibration, we can't get the virus? That's a very good question. My answer to that is a cautious yes and no. Your high vibration, so let me give you my example, perfect example. Right now, I came out here to Australia almost a year and a half ago. And I came out here on a tourist visa because I wanted to move here and I was already too old. They wouldn't take me. So the only way I could come here was on a tourist visa. So I did. And I was planning to do the tourist visa hop, which meant I have to leave every 3 months and then come back and get a new visa, which would be, I could have done that indefinitely, and then COVID hit. So I was over here doing the tourist visa hop, and then COVID hit, and then I had two choices. I either had to stay here, but if I left, I couldn't come back. And I chose to stay and watch what was happening in the States, and things got worse and worse and worse. So I reapplied, and they gave me another, 6-month visa. And so I'm going to apply again in a month, and I don't know what's going to happen. But so far, because I do my best to stay in line with where my soul takes me. It was really clear I had to leave the US. I mean, I could have told you why, I had a bunch of reasons why, but I had this really strong feeling I had to leave the US. Not only that, while I was here, before COVID hit, I was in New South Wales, which is the other state south of here, 3 or 4 hours south of here. And I was living there for a little while, and life was really painful and difficult. So much so that the house I was living in was attacking me. And I couldn't even no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get internet. It was like the place wanted to get rid of me. So I said, okay, right, I'll go. And I lost a bunch of money, and I moved back up here to where I was before, which I like it here. And then COVID hit, and all of the borders got closed. And here I am, quote, stuck in my fantasy. Place where there's no COVID. I live surrounded by rainforest and empty beaches and warm water and surfing and great people. And I'm really happy here. I want to spend the rest of my life here. That's what happens when you live with your vibration at a certain level. The universe takes you where you're going to be safest and happiest. So by living at a high vibration, I am immune to the virus because there's none here. And as long as I stay here and they don't start letting people into Queensland from other parts of the world or the country, I can be COVID free indefinitely because my vibration is at a higher level. Now, what you're asking is, if you raise your vibration to a higher level, will you be able to walk into a COVID-infested hospital room and not get it? And to that, I would say, no. I would not do that. Anything is possible, so is it possible that somebody could get their vibration to a level where all viruses would bounce off their aura? I'm open to that possibility, but I think it's very, very unlikely, and it's not something I would do. COVID is, let's talk about the symbolism of COVID. COVID is real. COVID is a real virus, and it is killing people. It's killing mostly sick and old people, but there's a lot of young, healthy people that are also dying from it and or getting all kinds of long-term, really fucked up things from it. It's not a good thing to have. The majority of people seem to get through it okay, but it's still not something that we want flying around. So it's a real thing, but does that mean that it isn't a manifestation of some other spiritual thing? No, it absolutely is a manifestation. COVID is the manifestation of our isolation. I'm attacking people's education, and I'm attacking people's lack of critical thinking. And that has everything to do with the internet. Now, I'm old enough to know what life was like before the internet came into existence. There's 2 or 3 generations that aren't. There are people, they've lived with it their whole lives, so they don't know what it's like to be without it. And I can tell you that since the internet, we have whole generations, and each successive generation gets more and more isolated and stuck in their head, which is why people don't know what to believe. Why people think if they have a strong emotional attachment to a belief, that now becomes the truth for them. That's why people want to fight with me about my personal belief, and they get very upset when I go, your personal belief is meaningless here. Because people who grew up in the age before internet, you understood there's a difference between external reality and your internal reality. People that are growing up now are so isolated and so stuck in their heads. I mean, people, before COVID, you could go and drive down the street and there'd be 2 people, especially kids, 2 kids sitting next to each other, but they're on their phones. They might even be texting each other. And I've known kids that the only way they knew how to go on dates was by texting. There were people that the only way they knew how to have sex was to each go home and sext each other. That they can't connect except through some kind of phone or internet. And that creates this feeling of isolation. And if you don't understand what it is, I understand what it is and I have ways to combat it. But if you don't know that, if your whole life, if your parents, didn't bother to parent you and they just threw you in front of a television, in front of an internet, then that becomes your parent. You don't know any different. You don't know that anything else exists. So of course people now have this belief that the Matrix is real. There was a movie called The Matrix and they think it's real because for them it is. Because they live in a computer matrix called the internet. And in the computer matrix of the internet, it's arbitrary. Meaning you can go to Twitter and get one source of information. You can go to Facebook and get another source of information. You can turn on Fox News and get one source of information. You can turn on CNN and get another source of information. And then, of course, there's all the dark web. And then there's chat rooms. And then there's what your friends say. And you get all this information coming at you. But because you live isolated, you don't know the difference between your internal reality and your external reality. And so then people want to tell me, yeah, COVID is fake. You want to know why? Because I can't trust anything anybody says, and everybody this and that. And it's because they don't know the difference between their emotional responses and objective reality. That's another reason to have a spiritual practice, because a spiritual practice, will force you to learn the difference between your internal experience and the results of something that you learn. Martial arts is great for that. You can stand in front of a mirror and practice boxing in front of a mirror, and I think I'm going to do this move and punch this way, and then you get in front of a person and you spar with them and you find out real quick if that technique's going to work or not. That's called finding out what's true and what's false. You live in your head the whole time based on information. You can't trust any information. You don't know. All you know is how you feel. And if you don't like what somebody says, you're going to reject that for some information that cosigns whatever you want to believe. And most people who are isolated are full of fear and don't trust anything. And you wonder why we're where we're at. COVID is the response to the collective unconscious of the world, which is, I am alone and desperately lonely. So what did we manifest? We manifested a virus that forced you to be alone. And now you finally feel, it gives us an excuse to feel what we've been feeling unconsciously this whole time. So that's what COVID really is. It doesn't mean that COVID's not real, but it also means that we manifested it, which means we can unmanifest it. But that starts with doing the stuff I'm talking about. Robert Seaman. Okay, I'm going to read the whole thing before I respond this time. Question: there have been some recent peer-reviewed articles pertaining to ayahuasca regrowing damaged nerve cells and promoting neurogenesis. Will term energy, I don't know what you mean by term energy. Will term energy work have the same effect? I don't know if it's going to have the same effect, but you're trying to push me in a corner. I don't like being pushed into corners. You read peer-reviewed articles saying that ayahuasca regrows damaged nerve cells. Okay, I don't know if that's true or not. Again, even scientists can have agendas. So, there can be a scientist who's really into ayahuasca, and he wants to prove ayahuasca. This is why you hear people talking about marijuana, how marijuana heals this and that and the other thing, until you dig deep enough and you find out, no, it's the CBD oil that does it. It's not the THC. But if people are really into THC, then they're going to say, no, you need to be smoking weed. The stronger the weed, the better, because they have an emotional agenda. They're addicted to weed. They like getting high. But as soon as you say, no, you need to just do the CBD, the THCs actually does all kinds of nasty things to your glandular system and all kinds of other stuff, they're going to get all upset and go, man, no, it's a medicine, you don't understand. Right? So I don't know that those peer-reviewed articles are coming from people who don't have an emotional agenda. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, I don't know. And, peer-reviewed things, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's even accurate. Anyway. But let's assume for argument's sake that that's correct. Peer-reviewed articles saying ayahuasca regrows damaged nerve cells. So, okay. It also does a hell of a lot of other things. Listen, I'm not completely opposed to the idea of somebody having a beneficial experience from taking ayahuasca. But if you watch my videos about it, I tell you the difference between what happens when you do any kind of entheogen with a trained, qualified, spiritually empowered shaman. Now, the other thing I'll say is that ayahuasca is probably okay for somebody who's grown up in an indigenous shamanic culture, because their psychology is different. Westerners, because of everything I just said about being isolated, are fucked up and broken. And they're looking for something to fix them. And what they need is they need a fucking therapist. They don't need ayahuasca. And so what ends up happening is that ayahuasca, if it is done correctly, which means that you have a shaman who can see into your aura and see what will happen and see what you need, and also has the ability to do the chanting and the drumming to surround and protect you, so that the journey that you have will actually help for your conscious evolution. That's how it's done. A real shaman, if you come to him and if he can see in your aura that it won't help you, he'll say, no, not you. You don't get to, you have to sit out. But we don't have that. Just the assumption of this question is that ayahuasca is good for everybody. That everybody should do it. That, one guy had a great experience and it helped him for the rest of his life. Therefore, ayahuasca is medicine for everybody. And it's just not the case. For some people, it's really damaging. Now, the fact is that ayahuasca is a poison. That's the reason why you puke and shit. It's because your body's trying to expel the poison. You would go into and you have a trip because you're going through a near-death experience. Now that's fine because shamans go through near-death experiences all the time. There's a practice that I know of where if you do a certain meditative thing enough, you'll actually die for 10 minutes and then you'll come back and you'll be a different person. So dying because of a shamanic experience isn't necessarily a bad thing. So having a near-death experience isn't necessarily a bad thing. But so does that mean you should go do it? I mean, we're talking about people who have damaged nerve cells. Do you have damaged nerve cells? Why does that matter to you? Are you looking for, you know what I mean? It's like there are certain medicines that you take that do all kinds of things. Does that mean you should take that every day or that you should take it at all? No, it's not necessarily what you need. The danger with it is that ayahuasca or any other entheogen, if done under the wrong conditions and or for the wrong reasons and or done for entertainment purposes, the problem is that you're going to have an experience, your aura is going to get torn wide open, but you'll end up just having your own narcissistic ego experience. And you'll end up worse off than you were before. And there are people who've taken ayahuasca that have been fucked up for life, that it's done bad things for their nerves and their brains. So it's not something to play around with. So again, that's very isolated. You're trying to throw me into a corner about that. So what difference does it make if energy work has the same effect? What difference does it make? I haven't done the research on that. I can tell you my experience when I do energy work, but it may not be because it regrows damaged nerve cells. But if somebody said to me that they did energy work and the result of that was that it regrew damaged nerve cells, I'd believe it. So makes me want to ask you why you need to ask the question that way. What is your attachment to ayahuasca that you need to ask the question that way? Let's see, Lion of Apollo. All right, so I'm really not interested. This isn't a back and forth. I've already given my opinion. I have a pretty good opinion on where you're coming from. It's a minority of billionaires and private interests with a large platform. That's bullshit. That's such bullshit. Then it's such generalized horseshit. Do you know who owns Fox News? The same people that are using those same high emotionally reactive terms that you're using. Do you know who owns that? The irony, in that statement is just amazing to me. So that's not what we do here. So you're welcome on the channel, but I am not going to interact with you anymore. If you have a question that's honest, I'll be happy to answer it. I'm going to put you in a timeout. It's not a block. It just means that I'm not interested in having this discussion with you anymore. You're welcome to your own opinions, and if you want to go make your own videos about that, please be my guest. I don't want to interact with it anymore. Let's see. Dakota Spruill, what is your martial arts background? Really? Does it matter? I have a martial arts background. I don't feel like talking about it. It's nothing we need to talk about today. If you watch enough of my videos, you hear me talk about it. I'm going to be doing some Qigong. I'm going to be teaching some new Qigong things, the 90-day challenge. The next phase is going to be really powerful since we're talking about martial arts. But that's where I learned it. The martial art that I trained in taught me some very powerful Qigong, which allows me to create my own Qigong, which I'm going to do. So that should answer your question. Ed the Wave question, what are the main differences between Vedic and Western astrology? I have videos on that. All you have to do is learn how to search within my channel and search for astrology, and you will find videos where I tell you exactly what the difference is. I don't want to go into it right now. Let's see. No, I am not trying. I have damaged nerves. Okay. So then I'm the wrong person to talk to. because I don't know what energy work will or will not do for that Guillain-Barré syndrome. I don't know anything about it. I'm not a doctor. So I don't want to give you false information. I would be really interested to hear what things you found out. And that would be, if you said to me, I've read peer-reviewed things that said that ayahuasca repairs damaged nerve cells for that particular thing, and I would be the first one to help raise money for your ticket to, South America to go make that happen. You would be one of those people that I would say, well, fuck, if that's what it'll do, then go do it. You are in the category of somebody that is supposed to be taking that medicine. Okay? I don't know enough, but if what you say is true, what are you waiting for? Go do it. Whatever risk is far worth it. Because that's a messed up scenario, what you're talking about. Having said that, since I'm not an expert in any of those things, don't take my word for anything. Go find experts, like doctors who know. Obviously, you've done the research and you have a reason for it. You're not just looking to get high or have an experience or escape yourself. You have a reason. So I hope that you continue to pursue that option, and if it's something that works for you, I fully, wholeheartedly support that. All right. I think I'm done. I've been on for a long time, so I'm done talking for today. Anyway, that's it. 90-day challenge. I am going to be introducing the level 2 here pretty soon, probably before the end of the year. And I'm going to start sharing with you. I'm going to do some videos about it, talking about it, taking the energy to the next level. I found out, and now I know what the difference is. I've been practicing this very high level energy work for a while, and I've known that it's different, and I've been told that it's, on the level of black magic and super powerful and all that, but I never understood why. Now I understand why. So now I have more tools to be able to create and offer this very high level energy work to other people. So I'm going to start doing that, and I'm going to start making videos. In the meantime, you can get started by doing two things. You can join the 90-day challenge and get started with the energy work there. I can also recommend, before I completely get rid of it, which I will very soon, lockdown.thunderwizard.com, the Celestial Qigong, which you get for almost nothing on that package. If you want to get started and be able to start preparing your body and your nervous system to handle this next level of energy that I'm going to start introducing, get started with the Celestial Qigong. You can also go to spirittao.com. I didn't say spiritual. Don't write things for me. spirittao.com to find out more about the Celestial Qigong, which you can use, which in and of itself is very powerful, but it will also get your nervous system ready for the next level that we're going to do. All right. Raymanovich says he's writing a question, so I'm going to give him a couple seconds. And I'm going to drink a sip of my organic kombucha apple crisp, which is why I'm burping so much. Waiting for Raymanovich. Waiting for your question, sir. I think you're a sir. Are you a sir? Raymanovich, question. Does a character of a reflection of people who have their Aruda... You're going to ask me, okay, so how many times do I have to say you need to get a reading? You need to get a reading. You keep asking me all these questions about your Aruda Lagna and your astrology, and I keep telling you the same thing. You need to get a reading. Because in order to really answer what you mean, and you keep going back to the Aruda Lagna. I mean, I've made it simple on how to figure it out. And if it's not simple, then what you do is you talk to an expert. That's how things work. Does a character of a reflection of people who have their Aruda Lugna in the 10th house shows what is best career for them? Here's how the Aruda works. The Aruda, in case you don't know what it is, the Aruda Lugna, we're all born, our astrology, we have an ascendant, which is our personality, and then we have our moon, which is our mind or our emotions. So our personal experience of the world is going to be a combination of those two things. Now, most people go around wanting to be loved and seen for who they are, but the world doesn't work like that. The world doesn't see you for who you are. The world sees you based on your reflection, which is called the Aruta Lagna, or the mount of the personality. And so knowing what your Aruda Lagna is will give you success in life because people want you to be that. Now, if your ascendant is different, then you may have a challenge. You may be trying to show people your ascendant, which is totally different from your Aruda. And if you don't show the world your Aruda, then people want to, they want to block your success because they don't like what they're seeing. They don't trust it. And the ironic thing is you're trying to be as authentic as possible, but you're not showing them your gift. So the Aruda Lugna is going to be your gift. So Raymond Avich's Aruda Lugna is in his 10th house, which is why he keeps asking me about 10th house Aruda. Your Aruda is how you do your job. It might tell you what you're going to do for a living, but it's going to tell you how to do your living. So my Aruda is the spiritual warrior, the warrior of balance, the peaceful warrior. That goes against my ascendant. My ascendant is very different. When I try and show myself based on my ascendant, people get very uncomfortable around me. And I have a problem. I had a big bully for an older brother, so I don't like bullies, and I don't like the idea of a warrior walking around flexing his muscles being a tough guy. That's why I wear this with the sleeveless shirts and why I lift weights. It's because it's my Aruda. That's how people want to see me. People see me that way. They trust me. They want to give me money. They want to be my friend. So I happen to be a spiritual teacher and a counselor and a Vedic astrologer. So I do that as a spiritual warrior. If my Aruda was something else like the con man, then I would be dressed up with all black and I'd have black makeup on. I'd be covered with tattoos and, smoking incense around me, and I would be this black magician because that would be how people want to see me. So your Aruda is how people want to see you. It doesn't necessarily say what you're going to do for a living, but whatever it is you do for a living, you need to do it as whatever your 10th house is. You said Aries in the 10th house. So a warrior or a general. The questions that you ask, one of the reasons I keep responding to you negatively if your Aruda is Aries in the 10th house is because that's so different from your Aruda. Aries in the 10th house is somebody who's really, really confident and really bold, and you just need to tell them once and they go, yep, I got it, and they go do it. You keep asking me over and over again, and there's so much need and the insecurity, and that's one of the reasons why I'm getting so annoyed by you, because your Aruda you're not acting according to your Aruda, right? So now take a look at your ascendant, your first house, take a look at your moon and see how those are different. Don't keep asking me about it. I want you to do it on your own, Mr. Warrior General. Go look and see how your ascendant and where your moon is, how that's different from the warrior general who goes out and conquers the world, because that's what you are. Now, whatever it is you do for a living, that's how you got to be. If you work at a grocery store, then you're going to end up being the manager of the grocery store and telling people what to do. If you end up, going to the military, you're going to end up having to be the general or the leader of the squad. Know what I mean? So figure it out. What else? Yeah, you're very insecure. That's totally different from your Aruda. So start acting secure. Start going around and pretending that you're a secure person. Watch, people are going to start treating you totally differently. And you'll see now, if you walk around insecure, people get really annoyed with you, right? They can't stand it. because it's like you're lying to them. You come across as this really powerful, confident person, and you're acting from all of this insecurity, and it makes people really uncomfortable because that's not what they see. If your Aruda was like a Virgo, moon in Virgo or something like that, or you know what I mean? Then they would go, oh yeah, he's a wallflower. He's really smart, but he's shy. We got to bring him out of his shell. They would be okay with you being insecure. But the warrior general, nobody's comfortable with an insecure warrior general. They want to beat the crap out of you or something. So just go pretend. Besides caffeine, why is it okay for you to put caffeine in your body, Robert? Why are you trying to protect that? I mean, I don't care. You can do whatever you want, but why are you telling me you're going to... Oh, okay. You're the guy that did the... Okay, you're the guy with Guillaume Barre. All right. So if you want to try energy work first, if you think that will helpful, go right ahead. I've got no shortage of energy stuff. Celestial Qigong. There is something else you should get. Here, you should go look for this. And I mean this very seriously. And that is, go online and look for Earth Pulse. It's a magnet thing about this big around. And it's, I forget what they call it, but it's an incredibly powerful magnet, the electromagnetic thing, and you stick it under your bed and you sleep with it all night under your bed or under your pillow or your mattress. And I don't know if it'd be helpful for your particular thing, but it's been extremely helpful. Go get one of those. They're not cheap, but go look at it. And if I have one, I've been using it for over 10 years. And I can tell you from my perspective, it helped me a lot. In fact, I even have, if you look somewhere if you look at somewhere, you'll find a link from me, but don't wait for that. Just go look for Earth Pulse. Earth Pulse biomagnetic, whatever it is. But it's the one that's the big one. It's a big, it's like this big around. It's like this thick. So it's a big magnet thing. Go do that. All right, that's it for me, guys. Again, I don't know why you're doing caffeine. I don't know why there's any real reason for anybody to be doing caffeine at all. It's really hard on the adrenals. It doesn't give you energy, it saps you of energy. So I don't know why you do caffeine, but maybe if there's a medical reason for it, then go right ahead. All right, anyway, that's it for me, guys. Time for me to shut up now. I'll see you guys all very soon. Let's see where I was using it. Right there. All right. See you guys later.